You're sitting on a toilet right now, or maybe you just finished. Either way, you use toilet paper. You didn't think about it. You didn't question it. It was just there, like it always is. But here's the thing. Toilet paper, as a mass-produced everyday product, is less than 200 years old. And for most of human history, including during one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen, it simply didn't exist. So what did the Romans use? The answer involves a sponge, a stick, a bucket of vinegar, and a lot of strangers. And by the end of this video, you will never look at a public restroom the same way again. Let's start with the Roman Empire at its peak. We're talking about a civilization of over 50 million people. They had aqueducts carrying fresh water across hundreds of kilometers. They had underfloor heating. They had concrete and roads, and a legal system whose ideas we still use today. These were not primitive people fumbling around in the dark. They were engineers, administrators, city builders. In many ways, they were more organized than most of the civilizations that came after them, and yet they shared a sponge. Public toilets in ancient Rome were called foracae, and they were nothing like what you're imagining. There were no stalls, no doors, no privacy of any kind. A foraca was typically a long stone room built alongside public baths, with stone or marble benches running along the walls. Cut into those benches were rows of keyhole-shaped holes, placed very close together, and Romans would sit down, side by side, sometimes knee to knee, and go about their business while having a perfectly normal conversation. We know this because ancient writers found it worth mentioning. Martial, Seneca, Juvenal, all of them referenced the latrines as social spaces. People read there, they gossiped, they discussed business deals. Saint Jerome, writing in the 4th century, specifically complained about the indecent conversations happening in Roman bathrooms, which tells you that the conversations were in fact happening. Some of the larger foracae could seat 40, 50, even 60 people at once. The one at the Largo Argentina in Rome, yes, the same Largo Argentina where Julius Caesar was assassinated, had seating for 47 people in one room alone. 47 people, one room, no walls between them. Now, beneath those benches ran a constant channel of water fed by the overflow from the nearby baths. This carried everything away, a genuinely clever piece of engineering for its time. But there was a second channel too, a smaller one, at the foot of the benches, at floor level, running in front of the users. This channel had one purpose, and that purpose is where the sponge comes in. The tool was called a tersorium, sometimes called a xylospongium, which comes from the Greek words for wood and sponge, because that is exactly what it was. A wooden stick with a sea sponge fixed to one end. The sponge would sit in the water channel, or in a bucket of salt water or vinegar, between uses. When you needed it, you reached down, picked it up, used it, and then rinsed it back in the channel or the bucket, and then you left it for the next person. One sponge, many people, over and over. Now, to be fair to the Romans, they weren't entirely wrong about the vinegar. They didn't understand bacteria, but they had noticed that vinegar and salt seemed to have some kind of cleaning effect. They were right in a rough way. Vinegar is mildly acidic and does have antibacterial properties, not enough to make a shared anal sponge genuinely hygienic by any modern standard. But they were trying. We know the tersorium was real because it shows up in writing. The philosopher Seneca, yes, the same Seneca who tutored the Emperor Nero, mentions it in one of his letters, in an account so dark it's almost funny. He describes a Germanic gladiator who, rather than face a horrifying death in the arena, snuck away to the latrine during a break, the only moment he could be alone, and killed himself using the sponge on a stick. Seneca tells this story as a philosophical point about freedom and dignity, but what it also tells us is that the tersorium was sitting right there, in the latrine, as a matter of course. Common enough that no one needed to explain what it was. Martial, the poet, also mentions it, dismissively in one of his epigrams, describing a sponge so filthy he compares it to something a stray dog would investigate. So we know it was used, we know it was shared, and we know it smelled. But wait, it gets stranger. Some historians now actually debate whether the tersorium was used for personal cleaning at all. An Austrian archaeologist named Gilbert Whiplinger has argued that none of the ancient sources explicitly describe someone using the sponge stick on themselves, and that the more logical explanation is that it was a toilet brush for cleaning the seat and the hole, not the person. So what did Romans actually use to clean themselves? Archaeologists excavating a Roman septic tank in Herculaneum, the city buried alongside Pompeii by Mount Vesuvius, found something unexpected. Fabric scraps, small pieces of cloth used and discarded, rags essentially. That's one answer. Another answer is the pessoi, small smooth pebbles or fragments of broken pottery used like a scraper. This tradition actually goes back even further to ancient Greece. 3 stones was considered the standard. There's even an old Greek proverb, roughly translated as 3 stones are enough, which was understood as a polite way of suggesting someone had said everything that needed to be said. Ancient bathroom humor that survived for centuries. And in Greece, the ostraca, the pottery shards used for voting to exile unpopular citizens, those same shards may have had a second use. Some historians believe people would scratch the name of someone they hated onto a piece of pottery before using it in the bathroom, quite literally wiping themselves with their enemy's name. The Greeks invented democracy, philosophy, and the Olympics. They also invented that. Now, before you feel too superior, let's put this in context. The Romans were light years ahead of most of what came after them. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, the infrastructure that supported those public latrines collapsed with it. The aqueducts fell into disrepair. The sewer systems were abandoned. The foracae were forgotten. For much of the medieval period in Europe, the solution to bathroom needs was a hole in a board over a pit, or a window over the street, or, if you were wealthy, a chamber pot emptied by a servant. The smell of medieval European cities was, by all accounts, genuinely catastrophic. The Romans, for all their communal sponges and social bathroom experiences, were cleaner than most of what came after them for nearly 1,000 years. Toilet paper itself, as a product you buy and use and throw away, wasn't commercially produced until the 1850s. The Chinese had been using paper for hygiene since around the 6th century AD, but in Europe and the Roman world, paper was too expensive and too rare to wipe with. You used what was available, and in Rome, what was available was a sponge, on a stick, in a bucket, that everyone shared. There's one more detail about the Roman foracae that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's the strangest one. The latrines had a reputation for being haunted. Because of the sewer gases that built up in the pipes beneath, it was not uncommon for flames to suddenly shoot up through the toilet holes without warning. Spontaneous fire erupting from the sewer while you were sitting on it. Understandably, people interpreted this as demonic. Researchers have found multiple Roman toilet sites with incantations carved into the walls. Prayers and magical spells written by people who were terrified of what might come up from below while they were at their most vulnerable. So picture this. You're in ancient Rome. You walk into a crowded public latrine. You sit down next to a stranger. You pick up a damp communal sponge from a bucket that smells of vinegar. The person on your left is discussing a business deal. The person on your right is reading a letter. And at any moment, fire might shoot up from below. This was daily life in the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. The next time you're alone in a clean, private bathroom with your own roll of toilet paper, maybe take a second to appreciate it, because for most of human history, none of that was guaranteed. Not the privacy, not the paper, not even the guarantee that something flammable wasn't lurking beneath you. History is never quite as dignified as we'd like it to be.